He died from the poison gas he brewed himself. Everyone thought that was the end. They were wrong. He woke up in another world, inside the body of a failed wizard apprentice, 2 months away from expulsion. And in this academy, expulsion doesn't mean going home. It means becoming a human test subject. Fortunately, every failed spell, every failed potion, and every failed experiment gives him system points. In a world where talent decides everything, failure itself became his greatest talent. In the center of the Angela Ring mountain range lay a vast plain. At dawn, Ian stood outside his house. He gazed at a giant tower that pierced the clouds. This was the Shadow Moon Tower Academy, the home of wizards. Ian had transmigrated into this world last night. He was now a low-level wizard apprentice. Suddenly, cold memories flooded his mind. He remembered his past life as a noble's son, getting swindled out of his magic stones, and the painful poison gas that killed him. Ian gripped the doorframe tightly. He was shocked by this sudden transmigration. The original owner of this body died a worthless death, and Ian had to find a way to survive. Last night, the original owner tried to make an awakening potion, but it created a deadly toxic gas instead. Ian walked inside his small wooden house. He entered his laboratory. The room was simple and messy. He went to the workbench and inspected the leftover ingredients. Suddenly, he picked up a withered herb and smelled something bad. The leaves had tiny white spots. Ian frowned. This was not moonlight grass. It was a bone rot flower, a deadly plant used for making poison. Ian became serious. A man named Simon had forced these materials on him. Simon was a middle-level apprentice. For 2 entire years, he had been tricking Ian, taking almost all of his magic stones. Ian only had 6 magic stones left. Simon studied dark witchcraft, so he definitely knew the difference between the herbs. This was a deliberate trap. Ian rolled up his sleeves and cleaned the workbench. He took real moonlight grass from a jar. He placed 3 stalks into a black mortar. He ground the herbs into a thick paste. Then, he melted menthol crystals over an alcohol lamp. He mixed the liquids together. Finally, he added a pinch of silver catalyst powder. The solution hissed. It turned into a pearly blue liquid. Ian watched the bottle closely, holding his breath. Suddenly, green smoke came out of the bottle. The liquid turned completely clear like water. Ian set the bottle down. "Failure," he said. Suddenly, a line of text flashed before his eyes. Awakening potion. Skill level +1. A glowing game panel appeared in front of him. Ian rubbed his eyes in disbelief. It was not a hallucination. A sudden warmth filled his chest, replacing his fear. Ian smiled for the first time. With this panel, he could survive in this harsh world. The panel showed his name, his age of 16, and his low-level apprentice realm at 53%. With a thought, Ian closed the screen. Even though he failed the potion, the panel gave him perfect memories of his mistake. He now knew the exact grinding pressure and the perfect timing for the next attempt. Ian washed his face with freezing water to calm down. He looked out the door at the neighboring houses. Only low-level apprentices lived in this poor area outside the tower. In this world, magic stones were everything. But Ian had a bigger problem. In 2 months, the academy would expel any apprentice who failed to reach the middle level. Those who were expelled faced tragic fates, often becoming human test subjects. Ian needed to break through his limits quickly. He ate a piece of hard black bread and immediately returned to his workbench. Ian lit the lamp and picked up the tools. This time, his hands were perfectly steady. The next morning, Ian prepared to make another potion. Suddenly, a loud knock came from the door. It was Simon. Ian tensed up. Simon was far stronger than him. Simon strode into the house like he owned it, carrying a bag of ingredients. He smiled falsely and asked if Ian wanted to buy more. Ian refused cautiously, saying he still had plenty. But Simon did not care. He slammed the bag onto the table and demanded 15 magic stones. A dangerous aura came from Simon. Ian knew he was forcing a sale. The ingredients were barely worth 5 stones, but Ian did not argue. He lied and said he was out of money, promising to pay as soon as his family sent more. Simon stared at him. He paused and then agreed. He left the house, planning to return in a few days. Ian watched him leave with a grim expression. He immediately ran to his next-door neighbor, a burly man named Kenna. Kenna was a powerful former knight. He looked stern, but was actually warm-hearted. Ian quickly explained that Simon was extorting him. He offered Kenna one awakening potion to protect him. Kenna became interested. An awakening potion was worth 5 magic stones. He asked if Ian was already a beginner in potion science. In this world, potion makers were rare geniuses. They became rich and powerful. Ian nodded sheepishly, saying he had a knack for it. Kenna readily agreed to help. He told Ian to call him if Simon caused trouble. Ian returned home and threw himself into his work. For 3 straight days, he refined potions non-stop. Late on the 3rd night, his eyes were bloodshot. His mind was exhausted, but he was on the verge of a breakthrough. He carefully mixed the ingredients over the lamp and added the catalyst powder. Suddenly, the liquid stabilized, glowing with a soft blue light. A wave of new insights flooded his mind. Awakening potion. Beginner, 1/100th. Ian smiled with excitement. He could finally fund his own cultivation. He drank the potion in one gulp. A cool, refreshing feeling washed away his exhaustion. Ian immediately sat cross-legged on his bed and began to meditate. To reach the middle level, he needed to form 9 spiritual runes in his mind. Right now, he only had 3. Under the potion's effect, lines of text began to flash. Star Moon, low-level meditation. Method skill level, +1. Star Moon low-level meditation method skill level, +1. 2 hours passed in a flash. Suddenly, a sharp pain hit his temples, signaling he had reached his daily meditation limit. Ian opened his eyes. He rubbed his temples and summoned his panel. A single potion increased Ian's meditation skill level by a full 3 points. Other apprentices did not have a panel. They could never match his incredible absorption speed. His heart pounded with excitement. He hurried to the laboratory to test his potion refining success rate. After a flurry of activity, Ian stared at 3 finished potions in his hand. He was in utter shock. He tried the refining process 3 times in a row, and all of them were successful. It seemed the system solidified his success on the panel, meaning any future attempts would never fail. Other alchemists could earn a steady stream of magic stones with a success rate of just over 20%. The total cost of ingredients for an awakening potion was less than 1 magic stone. Yet the finished product sold for 5. Magic potion science was absurdly profitable, but the barrier to entry was simply too high for ordinary people. Ian looked at the large pile of herbs on the ground, including the ones Simon forced him to buy. He sorted out the fake ingredients and realized he could refine about 100 more potions. A basic alchemist would be happy with just 10 successful potions from this amount. Ian smiled to himself. He really had to thank Simon for this forced collection. Ian lowered his head in thought about the magic stones he owed Simon. The high tower forbade apprentices from killing one another, but duels were allowed. This remote place was dangerous. He had to be on guard against Simon's vicious schemes. Luckily, the bodyguard he hired for 5 magic stones helped ease his mind. It was already late at night, so Ian washed up quickly and fell into a deep sleep. The next morning, Ian went to Kenna's residence again. Ian said, "Kenna, I am here again." Kenna called back from inside. Kenna said, "Just come in, the door's unlocked." Ian entered and saw Kenna practicing in the courtyard with a heavy 2-handed greatsword. Kenna's form blurred. The heavy weapon seemed as light as a dead branch in his hands, cutting through the air with a loud whoosh. Ian watched from the side and nodded in approval. The sword weighed at least 12 pounds, a weight that would tire an ordinary person instantly. Kenna stopped practicing and headed into the house. Kenna said, "Shouldn't you be focusing on cultivation? What are you doing here?" Ian followed him inside and pulled out a potion. Ian said, "This is the awakening potion I promised you. I made it last night." Kenna froze in surprise. He took the potion and examined it closely. Kenna said, "Not bad. It is the real deal. Congratulations." He put the potion away, his tone becoming much warmer. He then gave a warning. Kenna said, "I told you before to stay away from Simon, but you did not listen." Ian smiled faintly. Ian said, "I was foolish before. Now, I have to trouble you again." Kenna became serious. Kenna said, "I can only help you drive him off once. After that, you are on your own." Ian nodded. Ian said, "Once will be enough. Thank you, Kenna." Ian knew this was already a big favor. Everyone here had the same goal, to break through and become an official wizard. After returning to his room, Ian pulled out a dozen thick books from a corner. He looked over the zero-tier spells and chose his only attack, witchcraft, secondary frost freeze beam. He carefully read the description, and his status panel updated instantly, showing the skill as uninitiated. He began to familiarize himself with the spell and hand gestures. At first, Ian stumbled over his words and failed, but he was not discouraged, because the panel gave him a positive skill point for every attempt. He refined his movements, and his incantation became fluid. Finally, he completed the hand gestures and chanted the spell. Ian said, "Glacies!" His will rune began to spin rapidly. A pale blue beam shot out from his fingertip with a loud whoosh. On the ground 5 meters away, a thick layer of frost quickly bloomed. Across a 1-meter radius, the temperature dropped noticeably. But Ian was not impressed. Ian said, "This level of power cannot kill anyone." The range was only 15 meters, and the casting time took a full 5 seconds. At that speed, an ordinary person could easily run away or attack him first. But he had no better attack spell, so he decided to grind this one relentlessly. Just as he expected, after that first success, he never failed again. His skill level rose rapidly, which made him very satisfied. Pure witchcraft was much faster to level up than potion science. The only limit was his spiritual power, as a basic apprentice could only cast it 10 times before needing meditation. Over the next few days, Ian spent his time practicing the freeze beam and refining potions at night. When he grew tired, he read his thick books. Every time he finished a thorough reading, the panel deepened his memory and increased his potion recognition skill. The system was great at improving Ian's memory-based knowledge. He could fully absorb a complete book in just 3 days. Lately, Ian skipped all his free classes at the high tower. He wanted to avoid Simon and stay safe from danger. Every night, Ian took potions and meditated to increase his skill levels. 2 weeks later, at dawn, a loud noise woke Ian up. Someone was forcefully knocking on his door. Ian got dressed quickly and opened the door. Simon looked very angry. Simon said, "You did not reply to my messages for days." He wanted to scare Ian and control him. Ian acted panicked and shook his head. Ian said, "My family did not send my magic stones yet." Simon slammed his hand on the table. Simon said, "I do not believe you." Ian patiently explained that he spent all his stones already. Simon hesitated because Ian's words made sense. He thought Ian was a cash cow that finally ran dry. Simon became serious. Simon said, "Do you really have no stones? I hate lies." He wanted to use violence to teach Ian a lesson. Suddenly, Kenna appeared outside the door with a great sword. Kenna said, "He lent his stones to me. Got a problem?" Simon became afraid because Kenna was very strong. Simon said, "I sold herbs to Ian, so I need my stones." Ian wanted to buy some time to get stronger. Ian said, "Give me more time. I will pay you first." Simon agreed but gave a strict warning. Simon said, 1 month at most, or else. Then Simon slammed the door and left. Ian thanked Kenna and invited him inside. Kenna shook his head. Kenna said, "Be careful. Simon has the backing of a high-level apprentice." Ian became nervous because high-level apprentices were true combat monsters. Ian thanked Kenna for the important warning. Kenna looked a bit embarrassed. Kenna said, "I want to buy an awakening potion from you." Ian did not have any ready, but promised to make one soon. Kenna put down 5 magic stones on the table. Kenna said, "If Simon comes back, I can kill him for you." Kenna left, and Ian looked at the shiny black magic stones. He knew Simon would not actually wait a month. Trouble had found him, but Ian was no longer weak. His status panel showed great progress. He was now a low-level apprentice at 75%. His meditation method was growing fast. More importantly, his frost freeze beam skill reached the mastered stage. His casting time was now only half a second. Ian went to an empty clearing to test his power. He moved his fingers rapidly and casted the spell. A deep blue beam shot out instantly. The beam pierced straight through a giant tree 15 meters away. The entire tree trunk was covered in thick frost. He could control this destructive power at will, but it used a lot of energy. He could only fire 5 beams before running out of power. At noon, Ian realized his food stores were running low. He put on his gray robe and pulled up the hood. With 11 magic stones in his pocket, Ian headed out. The Angela Ring Mountain Range was home to 4 major wizard organizations, including the Shadow Moon Tower Academy. The deep mountains and endless forests were full of magical herbs and ancient ruins. But venturing inside alone was a certain death sentence for an ordinary apprentice. Ian walked along a faint forest path for half an hour. The path became crowded with low-level apprentices who lived in the wilderness. Soon, he arrived at the nearest gathering point, Nightfall Town. He followed the crowd through the main gate, and a loud noise washed over him. Ian subtly observed his surroundings. Strange banners hung in front of the shops, and the road was lined with unique stalls. Stall owners shouted their prices. One seller yelled, "Ghostface flowers, only 50 fragments each." Another seller shouted, "Fresh magic powder, double the potency." A mix of foul smells assaulted Ian's nostrils. He noticed that everything was priced in magic stone fragments. One magic stone was equal to 100 fragments. Suddenly, the crowd scattered like they saw a beast. A few figures in red robes passed by. Red robes belonged to high-level apprentices, who were true monsters. Ian kept walking and stopped at a large stall, owned by an old woman in a dark red robe. She sold dried and fresh potion ingredients. Ian recognized moonlight grass, snake language flower, and starlight moss. Ian said, "How much for the moonlight grass?" The old woman looked at him with ghastly green eyes. The old woman said, 30 fragments per stalk, discount for bulk. Ian felt uncomfortable under her stare. He shook his head and turned away. The old woman became angry. The old woman said, "If you are not buying, do not disturb my business." Suddenly, a powerful wave of energy erupted from her. Ian felt a lethal threat and realized she was a high-level apprentice. Ian quickly apologized and ran away. He lost all interest in browsing and entered a proper magic pharmacy with a green leaf logo. A young girl with pointed ears walked over to greet him. Ian handed her a list of ingredients for the awakening potion. The girl checked the list. The girl said, "One set is 80 fragments. We offer a discount for 50 sets. Ian realized these ingredients were much cheaper than what Simon sold him. His hatred for Simon intensified. Ian pointed to a display case. Ian said, "How much for a vial of awakening potion?" The girl said, 6 magic stones. Ian was surprised. Ian said, "Isn't it 5 stones?" The girl said, "This was brewed by our alchemist, so the quality is stronger." Ian looked closely and realized the quality was just like his own. He bought his materials, bought some food supplies, and walked toward the town square. A large crowd was reading a notice board filled with dangerous quests. One quest asked for hunters to kill a fiery rhinoceros for 2 magic stones. Another quest asked for an expedition to the Mist Swamp to hunt a witch dragon. These were demonized fierce beasts with dangerous talent magic. Ian looked at the low rewards and felt deep emotion. His family sent him 20 magic stones every 2 months. He finally understood their great sacrifice and expectations. He also knew Simon would never let a fat sheep like him go. Ian returned home safely without any trouble. The experience was a major wake-up call. He locked himself inside his room, determined not to leave until he became a middle-level apprentice. Days passed like a flash. Ian worked like a robot, practicing witchcraft, refining potions, and meditating every night. He only slept 4 hours a day but remained full of energy. His strength grew at a rapid pace. Ian ignored everything else and cultivated desperately to break through. A few days ago, Kenna visited him with an update. Kenna said, "Simon appeared nearby, but I drove him off. You can cultivate in peace." Ian felt grateful. He realized that becoming a potion alchemist made a huge difference. He wanted to cooperate with Kenna. In this cruel world, cultivating alone was too inefficient. The panel could not create resources out of thin air. 25 days later, Ian felt his spiritual power surge. He ran to his bedroom, calmed his mind, and drank a potion. Suddenly, Ian heard a soft pop. His spiritual power broke through a tough barrier. 9 complex runes fully formed in his mind. The runes rotated gently and glowed like moonlight. His spiritual power rose quickly like a massive tide. Ian woke up from his deep trance. He could now control his power with perfect smoothness. He could even project it to influence the physical world. Ian sat cross-legged with his eyes closed. But he could see everything within 10 meters. He saw tiny currents of wind, a small insect in the dirt, and his own red blood surging through his veins. But around his chest, he noticed tiny gray specks. Ian opened his eyes and jumped out of bed. His chest ached slightly. He lit a lamp and inspected his skin. He found gray blotches from magic power erosion. Ian understood the cause immediately. He spent days taking too many potions and meditating too frequently. He needed to find a way to strengthen his body. He opened his status panel to check his progress. He was now a middle-level apprentice. His frost freeze beam and potion recognition skills had reached mastery. Ian smiled with relief. The deep tension he felt since transmigrating finally disappeared. He left the house quietly to test his new power in a deserted clearing. He formed the hand signs rapidly and cast the spell. A deep blue streak of light shot out with a loud whoosh. The beam easily pierced a large tree 30 meters away. The trunk was covered in ice half a finger thick. It caused massive freezing damage and a powerful imprisonment effect. He could now cast it 10 times in a row. Ian hurried home, ate a quick meal, and went to see Kenna. Kenna came out to meet him. Kenna said, "What brings you here? Is something wrong?" Ian stepped inside and handed Kenna an awakening potion. Ian said, "Thank you for your help the other day." Kenna smiled and took the potion. Kenna said, "I will gladly accept this." Ian became serious. Ian said, "You mentioned Simon has a high-level apprentice backing him. How much do you know?" Kenna looked worried. Kenna said, "They are members of the Night Shadow Association." Ian was surprised because he never heard of them. Ian said, "What kind of organization is that?" Kenna sighed. Kenna said, "It is a new group formed by dark wizards." Ian became worried about retaliation, but Kenna reassured him that Simon was just a low-level member. Ian decided to change the subject to business. Ian said, "I heard you have a team that hunts demonized beasts." Kenna was sharp and understood his intent. Kenna said, "We are always busy hunting. You want to meet them because—" Ian nodded directly. Ian said, "I want to see if we can work together." Kenna offered his help before but never mentioned any payment. Ian knew Kenna was a man of good character, but he still wanted to observe the rest of the team first. He noticed that Kenna's attitude toward him became much more respectful. After a short chat, they agreed to meet the entire team in a few days. Ian returned home late that night and sat in silence. Kenna's sudden change in attitude made him realize the harsh truth. He thought about his poor neighbors searching for stones, the exhausted low-level apprentices in town, and the expensive potions in the pharmacy. He finally understood that he had been a sheltered child for the past 2 years, living comfortably on his family's money without ever facing the dangerous wilderness. That evening, Ian refined a potion and began his meditation. He gained fewer skill points this time, because his new realm made the low-tier potion less effective. He could not continue meditating for too long anyway because of his magic power erosion. To become a high-level apprentice, he needed to form 27 runes, which would take 10 years without better potions. Ian decided to find a new formula and buy a constant temperature box to store his potions. However, the box cost 80 magic stones, a massive fortune. The next morning, Ian headed to Nightfall Town to pick up his family's regular package. He was no longer afraid of Simon. The journey was completely peaceful, making Ian suspect that Simon was planning something dirty. At the post station, Ian saw massive red carriages used as public transport to the central tower. The carriages were made of steel and oak, pulped by giant scaled camel beasts. A powerful driver sat nearby, resting. Ian paid 50 fragments for the fare, because he also needed to go to the high tower to report his promotion and claim a free spell. Ian collected his package and opened the letter. His father sent 20 magic stones again. Ian knew his magic-free hometown must have made a terrible sacrifice to get these stones. He quickly wrote a reply, telling his father that he was doing great and that they no longer needed to send any more stones. He handed the letter to the messenger and boarded the carriage, choosing a private window seat. The carriage moved slowly along the poor roads. Ian watched the trees pass by. Most apprentices walked to save money, since 50 fragments was too expensive for them. He knew there were over 10,000 low-level apprentices in the area, all fighting to survive. As they approached the high tower, more red-robed high-level apprentices appeared. These powerful figures could live up to 150 years. They were the true vanguard of the academy, fighting in wars and gathering resources, while low-level apprentices like him did not even qualify for the battlefield. A massive wizard tower piercing the clouds appeared outside the window. They had finally arrived at the Shadow Moon Tower Academy. At the main gate, exhausted apprentices returned from dangerous missions, their clothes stained with dust and blood. Ian entered the gates with excitement, exploring the academy for the very first time. Pale, cold light emanated from the stone corridor walls. Pungent smells of bitterness and spice filled the potion classrooms. Ian followed his memory to the administration building to register his promotion. He lined up quietly at a familiar window. Half an hour later, it was his turn. Suddenly, a piercing shriek echoed above his head. A giant raven, half as tall as a man, hovered right above him. The raven stared with jet-black eyes, clearly demanding a bribe. Ian reached into his robe and handed over a shiny magic stone. The raven swallowed the stone in one gulp. The raven said, "You are not bad, brat. You can call me Lord Uma-er. Now, ask your questions." Ian knew this creature belonged to an official wizard named Luca Marino. Ian said, "Lord Uma-er, what kind of mood is Wizard Luca in today?" The raven said, "His mood is average, which is good news for you." The bird tilted its head and looked at Ian. The raven said, "I remember you from 2 years ago. A special genius named Irina started with your batch." Ian said, "You have an excellent memory. How is she doing now?" The raven said, "She broke through to high-level apprentice a year ago. She is the most promising student." The bird grew impatient, so Ian stopped asking questions and entered the dim hall. A man sat silently behind a desk. Ian bowed his head quickly. Ian said, "Greetings, Wizard Luca." The wizard's voice sounded like glass scraping together. Wizard Luca said, "State your business." Ian said, "I recently broke through to middle-level apprentice and came to register." Wizard Luca pulled out a compass. Wizard Luca said, "Place your hand on it." Ian stepped forward and touched the device. The compass emanated a soft light, confirming his breakthrough. Wizard Luca handed him a parchment to sign. Wizard Luca said, "Try to become a high-level apprentice within 10 years. Work hard, kid." Ian thanked him and signed the parchment, which unlocked access to new, higher-paying missions. Wizard Luca then handed him a witchcraft catalog. Wizard Luca said, "You can learn 1 middle-level spell for free." Ian scanned the list and made his choice. Ian said, "Wizard Luca, I choose this witchcraft." The wizard handed him an inheritance crystal ball. Ian covered the ball with his spiritual power, and a flood of new spell information poured into his mind. He thanked the wizard and left the hall. Ian walked over to the mission plaza, where a wide crystal screen displayed refreshing tasks. A large crowd of apprentices, including several in red robes, fought to snap up the high-reward missions. Suddenly, a cry of pain and angry curses erupted from the crowd. An apprentice whispered, "It is Nolan Monroe from the Night Shadow Association. He is a dark attribute genius." Nolan shot the crowd a cold glance, and everyone immediately fell silent. Ian covertly sized him up. Nolan wore a well-fitting red robe, but his sinister eyes gave him a ruthless air. Ian looked back at the screen and noticed a very tempting recruitment mission marked with a green leaf logo. It offered a profit-sharing partnership, specifically for magic potion alchemists. Ian left the mission center and hurried straight to the library. He picked out a dozen books about the continent and the unwritten rules of wizard society, determined to correct his memories bit by bit. The library suddenly grew utterly silent. All the witchcraft lamps on the walls were extinguished, leaving the room pitch black. Ian jumped up in alarm. Ahead, by a bookshelf, stood a blurry, dark figure. A soft voice whispered, "You seem to enjoy reading. Why don't you stay the night?" Ian felt a cold sweat. Ian said, "I'm sorry, Senior. I'll leave right away." He turned and ran, but the main door swung silently shut, locking him inside. The voice grew even gentler, whispering directly in his ear to offer him a fine opportunity. Ian's mind instantly became foggy, and he was about to agree. Suddenly, a cool sensation spread from his panel, clearing his mind instantly. Ian forced himself to stay calm. Ian said, "I have urgent business at home. Please let me pass, Senior." The voice turned ice cold. The voice said, "Are you sure?" Ian did not hesitate. Ian said, I am certain. Let me leave. The voice became hoarse and sighed, claiming Ian was missing a great opportunity. The main door slowly swung open, and Ian scrambled out, fleeing in disgrace. He ran straight back to the crowded mission square and breathed a sigh of relief. He knew that, without his panel, the wizard's creepy spell would have trapped him. Shadow Moon Tower was supposed to be a safe place for white wizards, but this encounter proved the world was full of unpredictable lunatics. Ian resolved never to return to the library until he became an official wizard. He stayed in the safe plaza until dawn, then took the carriage back to Nightfall Town. He headed straight to the magic pharmacy with the green leaf sign. The sign bore two beautiful words, Starleaf. A tall woman in a red dress approached him. Ian said, "I'm here on business. Is your steward in?" The woman smiled. The woman said, "I am Steward Milena. You can tell me anything." Ian was surprised. Ian said, "I saw your unique green leaf mark on the High Tower mission board." Milena nodded. Milena said, "That is the unique mark of Wizard Olivia. Are you here to apply as a potion alchemist?" Ian nodded. Ian said, "I am a beginner alchemist. I know how to refine the awakening potion." Milena's eyes lit up because the awakening potion was their best seller. Milena said, "Can you refine one on the spot to test your skills?" Ian followed her to the spacious back courtyard, which had separate rooms for other alchemists. Milena prepared 4 sets of ingredients. Ian entered an empty room, carefully holding back his true skill. He purposely failed twice and only succeeded on his 3rd attempt. Raising his potion skill to the skilled level, he handed over the finished product. Ian said, "Please appraise it, steward." Milena examined the potion and nodded repeatedly in approval. She immediately handed him a contract parchment. Milena said, "If you accept the terms, you can sign here." Ian read the contract clause by clause and felt highly satisfied. The pharmacy offered full lodging and high security protected by a high-level apprentice. The shop would provide raw materials, and Ian had to turn over 1 finished potion for every 4 sets of ingredients. They would buy any extra potions from him for 4 magic stones each. Ian secretly calculated his plan. He could easily make 40 potions a day, but he decided to pretend his success rate was only 40% to hide his power. By turning in just 4 or 5 extra potions a day, he could easily earn up to 20 magic stones while keeping time for his meditation. He could also get his own ingredients for free, and eventually unlock a constitutional potions formula to fix his magic erosion. Ian signed his name on the parchment. Ian said, "I am very satisfied with the terms." Milena looked delighted and shook his hand. Milena said, "Welcome aboard, Ian. We are colleagues now." After finishing the paperwork, Ian recalled his creepy encounter at the library and decided to move to the magic pharmacy immediately. From now on, he would have backing and security as long as he stayed out of trouble. Fortunately, his terrible trip to the academy brought him one great reward, a free middle-level spell. A regular spell like this was worth up to 30 magic stones. Ian called up his status panel on his way back to check his new skill. Eye of Vigilance, Beginner, 0/100. This spell summoned an invisible magic eye to watch his surroundings from 10 meters high. Ian wanted a shield spell for defense, but since none were available, he chose Vigilance, to prevent anyone from sneaking up on him. Not long after leaving Nightfall Town, Ian noticed a young apprentice with golden red hair following him. The tracker wore multiple witchcraft rings, a rare sight for a mid-level apprentice. Ian quickly darted into the woods to lead him away. The tracker, Gavin Monroe, smiled cruelly as he followed. He was hired by his underlings to wait for Ian all day. He knew Simon was already ahead to intercept the target. Suddenly, Gavin heard a soft, miserable cry from the trees. He hurried forward, worried Simon might steal Ian's magic stones. He broke into a clearing and found Ian standing perfectly still. Gavin glared fiercely. Gavin said, "Insect, I am going to slowly gouge your eyes out." Ian sighed softly. Ian said, "You are both so weak. How did you dare to chase after me directly?" To Ian's keen perception, Gavin posed absolutely no threat. Just minutes earlier, Simon had jumped out to ambush him. Ian's heart tightened, and he fired his frost beam instantly without thinking. The result was shocking. Simon stood like a wooden post and had his head easily blown apart by the ray. The man who terrified the body's original owner was actually pathetic. Ian turned his attention back to Gavin and unleashed his power. A deep blue streak of light flashed through the air. Gavin panicked and tried to activate his rings. Gavin's vision went completely white. An oval shield covered in deep cracks barely protected his body. Gavin looked at his shattered chest pendant in horror. This life-saving shield was a gift from his brother, a high-level genius. How could a single hit nearly destroy it? Gavin tried to scream, but the thick ice insulated his voice. The shield shattered completely into pieces. Gavin opened his mouth to beg for mercy. But another flash of blue light ended his life, plunging his consciousness into endless darkness. Ian looked at the frozen block of ice. It took 3 consecutive rays to break the shield, meaning Gavin was much stronger than Simon. He used his wizard's hand spell to retrieve his loot, collecting 63 magic stones, 2 witchcraft rings, and a rare potion recipe. Back home, Ian took a hot bath and replayed the battle. He suddenly realized something terrifying. Gavin looked exactly like Nolan Monroe, the dangerous genius from the Night Shadow Association. Simon must have brought Nolan's younger brother to help him. Ian's eye twitched in frustration. He had accidentally made a mortal enemy out of a genius high-level apprentice. A high-level apprentice could cast 6 high-level spells, and dozens of middle-level ones, making them true combat monsters. Ian knew he had to lie low, and cross that bridge when he came to it. Ian took out his unexpected prize, the Rock Bear Potion formula. The main ingredients were 100 milliliters of a Rock Armor Demon Bear's blood essence, and 10 grams of thorny vine bark. The potion provided a permanent boost to physique and power upon the first dose. Ian smiled, no longer blaming Simon for leading the trackers to him. However, obtaining blood essence required a rare spell, the bloodline purification technique. Ian did not possess this knowledge, but he remembered that Kenna was a bloodline wizard. Additionally, rock armor demon bears were dangerous high-level beasts that lived alone in Rocky Mountains. Ian had no intention of hunting them himself. He decided to let others handle the dangerous task, while he focused on alchemy. Just after noon, Kenna arrived at Ian's door with his 3 teammates. They entered the house and introduced themselves formally, treating the meeting like a serious job interview. Wade, a well-connected noble's son in leather armor, stepped forward first. Wade said, "I hope we can work together often in the future." Robert, a calm fire wizard, and Monica, a timid life system wizard, also greeted him politely. Ian smiled to ease the tension. Ian said, "I am Ian, a beginner magic potion alchemist." Kenna looked at him with relief. Kenna said, "You did not return yesterday, so I was worried you ran into Simon." Ian decided to hide the deaths of Simon and Gavin for now. Ian said, "The matter is resolved, but there might be repercussions from the Shadow Society. You should all be careful." Wade looked thoughtful. Wade said, "My friend told me the Shadow Society has been expanding secretly recently." Ian subtly observed the group and realized Robert was the smartest and strongest member. To show his goodwill, Ian pulled out 4 awakening potions from his pouch. The team's eyes lit up with pleasant surprise. Wade handed over 5 magic stones instantly. Wade said, "Haha, I will go first." The others quickly paid for their potions as well. Ian decided to bring up his quest. Ian said, "Wade, do you know where to find a rock armor demon bear?" Wade nodded with excitement. Wade said, "There are a few in Gale Fjord. They are not hard to find." Ian explained his needs. Ian said, "I need its blood and the bark of the thorny vine near its lair for a new potion." Robert checked with the team before replying. Robert said, "No problem. Give us 10 days for the round trip." Ian pointed to the potions. Ian said, "Would you prefer magic stones or potions for payment?" Robert said, "We will take the full payment in awakening potions." Ian was highly satisfied, since paying with potions was more profitable for him. He told them he was also buying Moonlight Grass, and changed their future meeting location to the Starleaf Pharmacy in Nightfall Town. Kenna and the others looked extremely envious of his new backing. Kenna immediately smiled and pulled out a large bundle of herbs. Kenna said, "We collected this together. How many potions is it worth?" Ian laughed, realizing they came fully prepared. He then asked Kenna about the purification spell. Ian said, "Do you know where I can find the bloodline purification technique?" Kenna nodded reassuringly. Kenna said, "I do not know it myself, but I know someone who does. I will ask about the price for you." The entire team smiled with relief, thrilled to have a direct partnership with a talented alchemist. An invisible eye of vigilance floated high in a forest clearing outside Nightfall Town, monitoring the area. 10 days had passed since Ian made his deal with Kenna's group. They were finally on their way back with the rock bear blood. During this time, Ian quietly celebrated his 17th birthday. He opened his status panel to check his progress. His awakening potion and magic potion recognition skills had reached mastery. While his vigilance eye reached the skilled level, he also secretly sold 2 rings for 180 magic stones and bought a runic constant temperature box to store his 100 accumulated potions safely. However, his meditation progress had slowed down significantly, gaining only 4% in 10 days, because his body developed a tolerance to the low-tier awakening potion. What excited him most was his secondary frost freeze beam. It was just 1 point away from perfection. Ian completed the casting gestures for one last grind. Ian said, "Glacies!" A dark blue, ice-cold ray shot out instantly, and his panel blurred before revealing an incredible transformation. Secondary frost freeze beam. Limit breaking, first time, 0/800. Limit breaking effect, 1, twin. Ian's consciousness trembled violently. In his mind, 2 identical pale blue ice runes materialized right next to his main will rune, radiating a frigid aura. Ian suddenly experienced a flash of deep insight. He realized that while ordinary wizards generated a single rune when mastering a spell, his panel allowed him to break the limits completely. Even better, the formation of these runes unlocked instant casting. He no longer needed hand gestures or incantations to unleash his power. Ian decided to test his upgrade immediately. With a single thought, the 2 ice runes flashed. Instantly, 2 icicle-like rays appeared before his eyes. Guided smoothly by his spiritual power, the twin rays carved a sharp arc through the air. Bang! Bang! The rays struck 2 separate trees 40 meters away, instantly shattering the wood and coating the trunks in thick ice. With this twin effect and spiritual guidance, he could now attack 2 different targets simultaneously, change the ray's trajectory, and cast the spell with 0 delay. The ice runes also drastically reduced his energy consumption, making his attack power top tier among middle-level apprentices. Despite this massive victory, Ian knew his defense was still a glaring weakness. He completely lacked a shield spell. He decided to ask Clayton, a friendly and well-connected alchemist colleague at the pharmacy, for leads on defense magic, since Kenna's struggling team lacked high-end information. Furthermore, the gray spots on Ian's chest were increasing due to continuous magic power erosion, forcing him to slow down his meditation. Even with this delay, he was on track to become a high-level apprentice in just 2 years, a speed unmatched by ordinary students. Later that day, Kenna and his team arrived at Ian's room, looking exhausted but deeply triumphant. Ian smiled warmly. Ian said, "I can tell by the looks on your faces that your hunt was successful." Ian handed over the promised potions. Robert then pulled out a large, chilled glass container filled with dark red blood. Robert said, "I kept the blood's activity preserved as you requested." Ian took the bottle carefully, thrilled to see it was more than half full. Ian said, "This is enough for the initial phase. Thank you." Ian paid each team member 30 magic stones as a bonus. Kenna and the others were overjoyed, since the reward was incredibly generous. Before partnering with Ian, they could barely afford 3 potions a month. Now, after just 1 successful mission, they each had over 5 potions and plenty of stones, securing a highly profitable future for everyone.